In archaeology, knowing when artifacts and ancient sites were made is extremely important. This process is called dating or establishing chronology. Accurate dating helps historians and archaeologists prove the age of objects, which makes our understanding of ancient civilizations more trustworthy. Without proper dating, history would be full of guesses instead of facts. Dating helps us put archaeological finds on a timeline. For example, dating methods showed that the Indus Valley Civilization was one of the world's earliest urban cultures. Sites like Kalibangan and Lothal were linked to the Harappan culture through dating, proving their importance in history. If we didn't have reliable ways to date these sites, we wouldn't know when they existed, and their achievements might be ignored or misunderstood. Sometimes, coins or seals found at a site give clues about its age. However, these clues are not always enough. That's why archaeologists use scientific dating methods, which are more accurate and reliable. Using more than one method to date an object or site makes the results even more trustworthy. So there are actually two main types of dating methods in archaeology: relative dating and absolute dating. Relative dating, well, it tells us whether something is older or younger than something else, but it doesn't give us the exact age. On the other hand, absolute dating gives us a specific calendar date or, a range of years for an object or site. Relative dating basically means determining the order of events or objects by comparing them to each other. This approach helps archaeologists put artifacts, sites, or even entire civilizations into a sequence, showing which are older and which are newer. It's really useful for understanding things like when a site was built, rebuilt, destroyed by fire, or maybe even flooded. However, it can't actually tell us the exact year something happened. Even with its limits, it's still very important for learning about the past, especially when better methods just aren't available. Now, here are some of the most important relative dating methods. Stratigraphy. Stratigraphy is actually one of the oldest and most important methods we have. It was developed by Neville Pitt Rivers and later on used in India by Mortimer Wheeler. Stratigraphy means studying the layers of soil or earth, which are called strata, at a site. These layers can form naturally or be made by humans over time. Each layer actually represents a different period. When archaeologists dig, they label the layers and study the objects found in each one. If they find coins, pottery, or inscriptions in a layer, they can use those to help date the other things in the same layer. However, the thickness of a layer doesn't always mean it covers a long time. Sometimes a thin layer can represent many years, especially in periods when not much happened. Also, digging pits or canals in later times can mix up the layers, so archaeologists must be careful. Typology is the study of artifacts based on their shape, design, and how they were made. The idea is that similar objects were made at the same time. For example, C.J. Thompson divided human history into the Stone Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age by studying the types of tools people used. This method is used all over the world. Pottery is often dated this way. For example, wheel-made pottery is usually newer than handmade pottery. Typology also helps us see how cultures changed over time. Flinders Petrie used this method to compare Egyptian and Palestinian pottery, while Gordon Childe used it for European prehistory. So, cross-dating means using objects that have already been dated, like coins or pottery, to help date other things found with them. For example, if Roman pottery is found at an Indian site like Archaeology, we know the site was used during the time when Romans traded with India, which is around the 1st century BCE. This method also helps when there are signs of foreign invasions or trade, like Indus-Sumerian seals. However, if the soil layers have been disturbed by things like erosion or digging, the results can be, less reliable. Flinders Petrie was a pioneer of this method in Egypt, and H.D. Sankalia used it to date India's Paleolithic period. Geomorphology is the study of landforms and how they change over time. Archaeologists use this method to date prehistoric cultures by looking at things like river terraces, glacial deposits, and soil layers. For example, D. Terra and T.T. Patterson linked India's Soan culture to the Second Glacial period, which was about 435,000 years ago. H.D. Sankalia also used it to date early stone tools in India. However, this method can be tricky because, landforms can change in different ways in different places. Paleontology uses fossils to help date archaeological sites. For example, finding the bones of certain animals, like elephants or rhinos, can show the site is from the Pleistocene period. Some animals, called index fossils, are especially useful because they only lived during certain times. Smaller animals, like rodents, are often better for dating since they didn't move around much. Plant fossils can also help, as they show what the climate was like when people lived there. Fluorine analysis measures how much fluorine has built up in bones buried in the ground. The longer a bone is buried, the more fluorine it absorbs. This method was famously used by K.P. Oakley to prove that the Piltdown Man, once thought to be an ancient human, was actually a fake. However, the amount of fluorine can change depending on the soil and the type of bone, so honestly, it's not always exact. So palynology is actually the study of pollen grains found in soil, lake beds, or peat. It was developed by Leonard von Post. Pollen tells us what kinds of plants grew in an area, which in turn helps us understand the climate and how people lived. Changes in pollen types can show when forests were cleared for farming, or when the climate changed. Each of these methods has its own limits, but together, they are really essential for building a timeline of the past. By using several methods and checking the results against each other, archaeologists can be more confident in their findings. In summary, dating methods, especially stratigraphy, typology, and cross-dating, are crucial for understanding human history. They help place ancient sites and objects in the right order, giving us a clearer picture of how civilizations developed and changed over time. Without these methods, honestly, our knowledge of the past would be much less reliable.